As per the date of the book, actually, the version of the .NET actually available on the market and utilized, commercialized and utilized, it is a 4.0 and up to date. Regardless, it is still valid, but the very common integrated platform or framework or the .NET version within the Microsoft Windows operating systems, it is a 3.5 and above. Whatever. So it is a matter of history only, this context of versioning, but all what we are going to see in theory and in practical also is to be running on top of the 4.0 and above versions. So any tools we define or any technical approaches we define to build or to design a web solution, it is to be enhanced by the .NET framework version 4.0 and above. Means the later, the earlier, sorry, not the later versions, the newest versions after the 4th version. A context of and designed ASP.NET solution. Actually, remember that the architecture we drawn it earlier. We said that we have a client and we have a web server where the service resides, where the service is hosted, and then after we have layers in between, the tiers. You remember the tiers? The scenario is now whatever the number of the tiers in between, it is like what we see this graph here. Actually, a request to be passed from the client, and the client usually we talk about the browser. We don't talk about we, me, you, and he and she. No, it's not the person. It is the software application responsible for running the designed web solution on your device. Mainly we talk about the web browser. It is the client. So the request to be passed to the server, and then after a response to be resubmitted as per the answer to the request from the server to the client, from the service provider, from where the process actually to happen to the client. This is actually to be happening on runtime. This is to be happening on runtime, and this is a clear draw, and this is a clear graph that presents to us the life cycle which we drawn in last class, the life cycle of a web page and the life cycle of a web application. Both. Request, response, request. It's a common sense understanding here, but still you have to clearly recognize that and stress on that. Remember that the life cycle, whether it is a life cycle of a web page or a web application, there is a rendering phase that has to happen at the end of the stage. Means all the generated or developed web ASP.NET solutions, they have to be rendered in a view that the client has the capability to display or just to visualize to the end user. Means the web browser here, to visualize what we, me, you, and everybody can see, he has to render what has been developed in the ASP.NET or using the ASP.NET into a form or a format that he can understand. Because the ASP.NET technology, remember, it is a contextual, it's a textual description, some commands or group of commands or list of commands to do different tasks, which the client, the web browser, do not understand, cannot visualize the ASP.NET on their native, on their raw nature. No, he has to render them into a format that he can understand. Usually, everything to be displayed on a web browser, it is an HTML-based context. Remember that. So everything implemented in ASP.NET is stored and hosted in a web server. It has to be ended at the end on a web browser to be displayed. Thus, the rendering is one of the important phases during the life cycle of a web application or web solution. Any questions here? Are you with me?
Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Okay,
Mr. With you.
that's great. So at this level only, I asked you any questions because I need to bring your attention is that because every ASP.NET solution, it's not mandatory to have integrated tools from the .NET framework. We may, for example, create only a very static application that has only some pictures and some text. Only that textual presentation of something to be delivered through the web. So straightforward. The context will be sent to the browser without any need of rendering. We do not have ASP.NET tools to be rendered into an HTML or into a format that the browser understands, because everything is already clear and it can immediately displayed by the browser, the client. So yes, in this case, there is a short time in processing and in displaying the solution. Yet, when we talk about the controls, which are the tools to be delivered by the .NET, the buttons, the labels, the grid views, the rich text boxes, whatever, drop-down menus, the combo boxes, all of the controls that we may find within the toolbox inside the Visual Studio, they are controls. They are .NET solutions. They are working and they are successful. Why? Because of the .NET solution, the Microsoft's .NET framework. Those controls, if they are integrated into an ASP.NET solution, they are actually to be generated within an Aspx page. Aspx, remember. And they have to be rendered before and prior of being displayed into a final page. Means they have to be actually rendered into an HTML format, an HTML view, in order to be displayed on a web client. Rodina just joined. Great. Continue. Remember that everything actually integrated as a .NET solution, it has a code behind file that controls that. Means we discussed that and we presented that earlier. When we generate an Aspx page, the IDE, integrated development environment, the IDE, mainly we talk about the Visual Studio, generates a code behind file linked to the Aspx page that you generated. You generate one file. The Visual Studio generates two files, the one you created and a linked file that it is, as per our book, it is written in C#. That has all the definitions of the tasks and the functions and the controls you want to do on top of your controls, use controls or integrated controls, buttons or labels or text boxes or whatever. Those and this code behind file or this program, let's say script, that it is existing in background and it is integrated by the IDE, it is to help you finalize the processing tasks intended by the page. Whatever you are willing to make calculations, you are willing to make insert into a database or retrieve from a database, you are willing to display, all the tasks you want to do. This code behind file might help you in doing that. It is not a unique solution, but it is intended for such purpose. Whatever it is, one file or two files, remember, all of the thing has to be rendered into an HTML format, because if we are having a code behind file in C#, the C# is not something to be displayed to the end user. It is a matter of textual coding. It's a programming code that the browser does not understand. So it has to be rendered again into an HTML also and being sent to the browser, which is the client, where the browser will display them and help the users to be able to, let's say, visualize them. I hope that you are clearly understanding this context of code behind file. One very approach, actually, from the very important approach that we have to recognize when we talk about the .NET framework is the event handler. Or this is in singular, or the event handlers in plural. The event handlers, they are the tools responsible for helping you when you design a solution to finalize the task or the group of tasks you are willing to do. You are creating a web page for what? To deliver services. What are the services? To save registration, to search, to log in, to display books, whatever you want to do when you design a web page. So the tasks you want to do, the list of functions you want to do, you might need to make them be activated by the user. When the user needs them, he has to click a button, or he has to click a picture, or he has to click a text, or he has to select something. For example, in order to display the list of courses, the user has to click a link that opens the list of courses, the available courses. The matter of clicking a link, it's the event. The link clicked by the user, it's the event handler. It's the event handler. So we are handling an event, which is the click, using an event handler. We are handling an event using an event handler. So an event is handled by an event handler. Is it clear, this phrase? I hope it is. By default, actually, our IDE, our defined IDE, do integrates an event handler for all the event handlers that we can utilize from the .NET framework. And per the example, actually, we are integrating a button. This is a button that we are integrating into the visual interface. So it is an ASP button. We are dragging and dropping from the .NET framework. We are not just drag and drop. And once you double click it, you'll find that the IDE in the code behind file will generate to you one phrase like this. Immediately you'll find it ready. It holds what? From the properties is the handler. So it is specifying that this component that you defined earlier in your visual interface holds already an event handler. So it is acting as an event handler. It is an event handler. So you do not specify if this is the handler or not. You can control. But by default, if it is able to be playing the role, as per an example of a button here, to play in the role of an event handler, so the IDE would actually declare that for you and would help you to find the scope ready. So you just utilize it. You just finish your task. You do not need to specify that this object is an event handler or not. So it will give it to you ready. You just continue your task. Event handler. This is done by whom? By the IDE, the integrated development environment. In our case, is the Visual Studio. From the other technologies that we may actually have and stand on when we generate or we design ASP.NET solutions, the context of the directives. The context of the directives. What are the directives? Actually, they are a group of, let's say, commands that they are actually capable of delivering to us links to external resources, to maybe even parallel and internal to our environment resources. Resources are files or variables, values, whatever they are. So those directives, which are links to commands to link us to external resources, commands to link us to external resources, they are facilitating the task to the developers by helping them not to rewrite codes again, easy to use, and no need to duplicate the contents and to regenerate the contents again and again. So no duplication by not writing the code again and again. And once you need the value, you just call the directive only. It's just a matter of call, directive. So the directive is it's a simple command to be utilized for different purposes. But what is it? It is to display actually a value for you to be displayed on your interface. It might to display actually a value from a resource, an external resource. The resource might be a file, might be a variable holding a value, might be an object from a database, might be different things. We will see actually two aspects of the directives, but even though later on when we talk about the binding later on. But the syntax of integrating a directive, it is like that. So every directive has to be surrounded by, it starts with less than percentage at, and it ends with percentage at. This is the syntax. So this is a directive. Once you find something like that within your ASP.NET solution, this is a directive. This is a link to a directive. This is a place where a value of a directive would be displayed. So in here, this actually what I'm highlighting right now, it would be replaced when rendered to the end user. It would be replaced with the value of what this directive here, what has been mentioned here. It will be actually replaced by the value and displayed to the end user at the end. The page will not display this full phrase, this code. No, it will display the value of the directive. Which directive? The one we find it here in between those two keywords, let's say, less than percentage at, and then percentage greater than. Conclusion, just conclusion here, just why we may talk about the directive and what is this technology and why this technology actually it is coming to us is, as I said, it is to facilitate the work to the developers to not duplicate code and not to regenerate code again and again, and to use values just by calling the directive or the resource holder. The resource holder, remember, it might be a page, a full page. It might be a variable, simple variable, int A, int B, and so on. Just it holds a simple value, one data type. So directives are resources, external resources linked to the web, to the designated web ASP.NET page, and the position where you state this syntax on top, bottom, left, right, whatever you need, you just type this script. But here you have to represent the directive with its respective name. What is the name you already create the directive with? Any questions, please? Examples of directives. As I said, it might be a full page, master page or page. Actually, this is to have values to be duplicated for all pages. We name it master. It holds values to be duplicated within all contents or within many portions from the project. A control, we may talk about grid view, text box, something that holds values. Actually, an external resource, we may talk about a library, or we may talk about a class, something like that. Whatever the directive is, it is a resource that holds values. So you have to recognize them all. Yes, this is for sure. But the first thing that you have to memorize and understand while understanding that is that the directives, they are resources, external resources to the page or to the solution you are developing that holds value or values in plural. Directives. Okay. I passed and I skipped one of the directives that we will need, which are the assemblies. The assemblies here. When we generate an ASP.NET solution, solutions, we may link our solution to external resources. And from the external resources, we might talk about assemblies. What are the assemblies? They are actually libraries that holds functions from within the operating system environment. I repeat, when we develop and when we design a web solution, we may talk about integrating and linking external resources like the assemblies. What are the assemblies? The assemblies, they are data resources, they are libraries, classes that holds functions and functionalities from within the operating system. نظام تشغيل. Means we're going to link functions from the operating system into our web solution. Yes, we can do that. Absolutely. To link to a database, to link to a data, let's say, data store from within the device or whatever. There are numerous samples and examples talking about integrating assemblies, but you have to know that the assemblies, they are simple classes, libraries that they hold values and they hold actually functions and functionalities, classes with functions, classes with methods. You just use them to, you just link them to call their contents, their functions, to use them as predefined methods. No need to rewrite the code again since the function is available. So as per an example, if you want to, for example, search for DLL files and you need to search the computer itself, no need to type or to just to create a new code for a search function. You just use the operating system search tool by linking a library, which is an assembly that the operating system gives. So this is an example where we can utilize an assembly. We can integrate an assembly into a web solution. Other resources that can be actually linked, which are the databases, Microsoft databases. MDB actually is an Access database, file-based database. Generating those links here, actually the web pages with the external resources, whatever they are, actually assemblies or databases or whatever, actually it has to be indicated that this is a project. The IDE, the solution, has to recognize that this is a solution. This is a solution. It's not a group of files separated. No, they are linked to a solution. And this is to be done from the beginning, actually. Once you start developing and designing a web solution, all the steps, they are to be done from within the same, let's say, tool or interface or API, the same IDE interface. So thus, the environment will recognize that this is a web solution. This is a solution. This is a one solution. Okay, technically, actually, you talk about the Visual Studio, how he is able to display the solution once created by following the steps of the Visual Studio, or just doing them step by step, you yourself as a user, as a developer. So this is actually a technical approach describing the behavior when in practical. Designed web solutions using the ASP.NET, we discussed that it is actually a generation of a group of web pages that they have the extension .aspx. So Aspx files, they are web pages developed using the ASP.NET technology. If I ask you what is the doc, for example, if I ask you, What is the doc files? What is this? This is a simple Word file. It is a Word 2003, 2007 file. When I tell you docx files, what are they? This is the sort of the 2007 and above, also Word files. If I tell you, what is this, let's say extension? What is the XLS files? Those are Excel files from Microsoft. So very, very clear. ASP.NET, they are pages, they are web pages, they are web interfaces built and developed using what? Using the ASP.NET technology. They are not the unique product of the ASP.NET. The ASP.NET do not only produce ASPX pages or ASPX files. No. Other solutions like the control files, which are utilized to authenticate users, for example, who is allowed to use a resource or not, access control, things like that. Web services, actually, ASMX, actually, it's the extension via which we may have actually control over the web, the use of the web resource or connectivity. Yeah, we can dedicate that to the ASMX files. Duplicated content between pages within the same solution, they might be actually inserted into a master page. Master, it is a web file that holds duplicated content, duplicated between whom? Duplicated between the web pages into within the same project, within the same solution. Sitemap, it's a graphical view of the composition of a solution, how many pages and how many sub-pages with links. This is the sitemap. Every and each single ASP.NET technology actually based web solution has a config file that holds the settings of the website. Settings, the global variables, the list of, let's say, controls, whatever. Some global configuration is a group of settings related to the web solution, to the ASP.NET solution, stored in a config file, .config file. It has the extension config, like the doc or docx or XLS. Config.config is a file that holds the settings of a web solution. Again, any questions, please?
No, Mr.
Great. Great. We continue. We discussed earlier about the stateless. We discussed about the loosely coupled. We said that the ASP.NET developers, they face a challenge, which is the context of the loosely coupled. What is it? Means actually every and each single request the user has to make, the response has to come from the server itself. Means, for example, if you use the ADWave, the registration page, you open it now, and then after you change to another page, and after 30 minutes, you need to open that page again. What happens? The client, means the browser you use, has to ask the resource from the server again and render it and display it to you. If he does not do, you'll not be able to visualize that. This is the challenge due to the loosely coupled state. And thus we are talking about the stateless HTML or HTTP solutions. They are stateless. This is a challenge. Remember, this is a difficulty. This is an obstacle to make the application be very fast, not fast. This is a challenge that the developers has to trespass to give a better solution to the end user. There are solutions for that. Amongst the solutions versus the state or being stateless, or let's say loosely coupled scenario, is to use a solution to avoid the round trips, the caching. We define also the cache or the caching. It is a local memory to hold things locally inside the browser's cache or inside the browser's memory in order to avoid the round trips. Means if you open the EduWave now and you open the page, for example, where the courses are, your transcript, something like that, your transcript, let's say, and you close this page and you open another page. After a few minutes or after a while, even after a day or a week or a month, if the browser is still holding the same data, it will be displayed. But this is actually to be done for a few seconds or minutes only. When you request the same page again to be opened, the response would come from your view state, from your client's memory, not from the server side. So the request, I come back, the request will not go to the server. The request will go to the client itself, to the view state, to the memory of the client itself, the cache of the browser itself. And then after it will give you the response to you from the cache itself. Why? To avoid a time waste, to avoid going to the server and coming from the server. So this is much more faster. View state. Definitions, and let's say features related to the view state itself. It maintains the value locally. It maintains the value locally without the use of the session. Without the use of the session is another technology that holds values to be utilized between pages in the let's say browser's cache. So without the session, or the sessions in plural, the view state would retain values. It is a place where to hold the value required to be utilized again and again and again. The value of what? Of a text box, of a label, of a drop-down menu, all the controls you have in your page, things like that. We may configure this view state to have those values, and it does not need actually configuration. It is to be running from itself. Positive side, the advantage of the view state, the implementation is easy to do. The implementation is easy. It's a simple group of steps to do upon the guide, no more, no less. It is completely from the client side, to be done on the client side, and no need for the server resources, not required at all. It is from the web client itself. It's not from the web server. It does not interfere to the web server contents. This is another view to isolate, let's say, components, and thus to raise up security views, security solutions, to raise up the security deployment from within the concerned web solution you designed. Other technology that might be actually utilized with the ASP.NET, within the ASP.NET solution, the sessions. We define the sessions. The sessions, they are a values holder that can be utilized across pages from within a web solution. It is to hold the value, and it is to maintain, let's say, the value to be utilized from within between the user, client, and the server. Once the request is passed again and again and again and again, a new instance from the session would be generated. Because if we don't use view states or sessions per our concern, if we submit a request to a web server, everything would be lost. You click a button again to display the value again or to refresh. If you don't specify what are the values to be utilized or to be refreshed, everything will be lost. Technology is like that. You cannot refresh, simply refresh. So there are rules you have to obey too. So for now, actually, to preserve the data, we saw the view state and we defined the session. And per the totality of the controls here, you are going to subdivide them into two groups, whether they are client-side option or server-side option. If they are from the web client into the web client, this is the client side. If they are from the server side in response to the client side, so those are server side state management tools or options. Any questions, please? Today is 14th. Great. If you hear your name, please just say yes. If you hear your name, just say yes. I'm going to stop the recording.